The sun hung high over the red dunes, scorching the land beneath it. Sand stretched endlessly, broken only by jagged rocks and bones long stripped clean. In that silence, a man knelt beside a flickering fire, the desert wind tugging at his torn armor. His beard was dust-coated, and his muscles tight with survival instinct. He gripped an old spear, wooden, cracked, and fused at the end with sharpened alien stone. On its tip, a strange animal roasted over the fire's glow. He had found the creature half buried in the sand. Its skin was rubbery and blue, limbs limp like it had never walked right, but meat was meat. And it had been 2 days since he tasted anything warm. The fire crackled, burning low beneath the skewer. The spear's shaft groaned under the heat, but held. He watched fat drip onto the flames and sizzle. The air smelled of char and hunger. The man leaned closer, eyes scanning the horizon. No signs of life. Just wind, fire, and silence. He sighed. Survival wasn't glory. It was patience. It was caution. It was never resting your ears, even when you chewed. Behind him, the silence twitched. A subtle shift in the air. His fingers gripped the spear tighter. He didn't turn. Not yet. Not until he heard the sound again. A whisper. Dry and sharp, like words pushed through broken teeth. Then it came again, close, too close. Now your species is on the menu. He spun fast, rising to his feet in one motion. The spear lifted from the fire, dripping fat onto the sand. Behind him stood a figure tall, lithe, and shimmering. Her skin was the color of moonlit stone, glowing faintly. Long white hair danced in the breeze. And in her hand, a blade pulsed. Softly with blue light, she didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes were silver and narrow, but not dead. No, they watched him like he was prey, not a threat. Just meat ready for judgment. He didn't lower the spear, and she didn't raise the blade. The fire cracked between them. He had seen many things since the crash. Beasts, machines, wrecked. Outposts with skeletons inside. But this was the first time something looked at him like it had already tasted what he would become. He stepped back slowly, circling the fire. She mirrored the move without stepping forward. "What do you want?" he asked, voice low and rough. She tilted her head slightly. Her lips didn't move, but he heard her again. "You are cooking one of our scouts. That is not allowed." He blinked. Looked at the creature on the spit. Suddenly the odd limbs and twisted face made more sense. It wasn't just wild desert meat. It was something sent to find him, or worse, sent to test him. He lowered the spear slightly, but his voice grew harder. "I was starving. It attacked first. I survived. That's what we do." A pause. Her eyes narrowed, and then a whisper filled the air again. Cold, measured. "Then maybe you are worth more than meat." The fire popped loudly. He didn't move. His breath came slow. He had no allies, no backup, no plan. Just an old spear. Cracked armor, and a half-eaten scout spinning over fire. She finally stepped forward, blade still low. The heat shimmered around her armored legs. Her voice echoed again, soft this time. "Or maybe I'll taste you after all." The spear rose again in his grip. The dance had started. And he knew desert dances only ended 2 ways. Blood in the sand or silence in the soul. Asterisk. The alien woman's blade glowed softly as she stepped around the fire. Her eyes locked onto his without fear. There was a grace to her movements, like she wasn't walking but gliding. Her armor shimmered with tiny symbols that moved across the surface. She looked like a predator that didn't need to rush the kill. The human stood still, sweat rolling down his temple. The heat of the desert was nothing compared to the fire rising in his chest. He had faced storms, wild beasts, and machine sentinels. But this creature was different. She had language reason, and a cold hunger in her tone. "What's your name?" he asked, tightening his grip on the spear. She tilted her head again. Her long white hair fell across her shoulder like silk. Her answer didn't come from her mouth, but through the air like before. It slipped into his mind like smoke through cracks in stone. I am called Vera, first Talon of the Zith Order. You cooked a scout. That demands answer. I didn't know what it was, he said. It ambushed me. It died. I lived. That's the answer. Vera's glowing eyes narrowed. For a moment, he thought she might strike. But instead, she turned her gaze to the roasting body still dripping over the fire. Her expression was unreadable. She showed no sadness, no anger, just awareness. A calculation. You killed it with that? She asked, pointing to the crude spear. Yes, he replied, for a few heartbeats. They stood in silence. The wind brushed sand around their feet. In the distance, red cliffs shimmered under the sun. The fire crackled quietly between them. Then she did something unexpected. She sheathed her blade. If you can kill with that stick, then maybe you are worth testing? His brow tightened. Testing for what? For survival, she said, or for extinction. We were watching you. Now we must decide what your species is. He stepped back once, then steadied himself. Why me? You are the only one left alive within this sector. You are the final sample. You represent your kind. If you fail, your species fails with you. He stared at her. Her voice was calm, as if she had said something ordinary. But to him, it felt like a weight crushing his ribs. He wasn't a soldier anymore, not a leader. He was just trying to survive the desert. And now, suddenly, he was a judge for all of humanity. I didn't ask for this, he said. No one ever does, she replied. A strange drone echoed above them. He looked up. A small sphere floated through the sky, humming with energy. It was watching, recording. It pulsed red for a second, then blue. Vera glanced at it once, then turned back to him. Your test begins now. You have 1 day. Prove your species is more than meat. Survive and impress me. Before he could answer, she stepped back into the sun's glare. Her figure faded behind a veil of heat waves. She moved like a ghost slipping between flames and air. Then she was gone. Only the hiss of fire and the smell of cooked flesh remained. He stood in silence. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sudden weight of what lay ahead. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was standing on the edge of something far greater. Something dangerous. Something final. The fire had died to embers by the time he moved again. The roasted scout still hung limp on the spear, burnt and silent. He kicked sand over the flames and slung the meat over his shoulder. He would not waste it, even if it came with guilt. Wind had shifted. It carried a dry chill now, sharp like broken glass. He could feel eyes on him, but none he could trace. He walked toward the nearest rise of rocks, dragging his gear, stepping carefully with each boot sinking into red sand. The drone was still above, a small dot in the sky. It followed him silently, a floating judge. Sometimes it beeped. Sometimes it blinked. He tried to ignore it, but its presence clung like a shadow he couldn't shake. He reached a ridge by mid-afternoon. The climb was slow, hands scraping against hot stone. At the top, he looked out over the broken valley below. The terrain was cracked and scorched, no rivers, no shade. Just jagged skeletons of mountains long dead. He sat on a flat boulder and tore a piece of meat from the roasted carcass. It was tough, sour, and oily. He chewed anyway. Every bite was survival. Every swallow was resistance. Even if the creature had once been sentient, it was dead now. And he was still breathing. From the rocks behind him came a low hiss. Not a whisper, not a word, just a hiss. He froze. Slowly he lowered the meat and turned his head. A pair of black eyes blinked from the shadows between the stones. A creature crawled forward. It was not like the scout. This one was leaner, faster looking. Its limbs folded like blades. It had no armor, just pale skin stretched tight over bones. It moved like hunger given form, He stood without hesitation. The spear came to his hands like instinct. He took one step back, careful not to fall off the ridge. The creature crept closer, silent and crouched. Its breath was visible in short, steaming bursts. It lunged. He pivoted, dodging left. The spear slashed upward, grazing its side. Black blood sprayed onto the stone. It screamed a high, piercing sound like metal tearing. Then it backed off, circling him again. His heart pounded. He could see more movement now. Shadows slinking along the ridge below. At least 2 more of them. They were faster than him. Smarter too. Maybe this was part of the test. Maybe this was no test at all. He stepped sideways along the ridge, eyes locked on the lead creature. The others flanked him from different sides. He couldn't outrun them on flat ground. He needed height. He needed position. He climbed higher, footing loose on brittle stone. One of them struck. Claws swiped for his legs. He leapt back, and the ground gave way beneath his boot. He fell, rolling hard, scraping his shoulder and elbow against the rocks. Dust filled his lungs. His spear flew from his hand. He scrambled up just in time to catch the shaft mid-air. The creature had followed him in the tumble, but it didn't expect the speed of his swing. The spearhead caught it in the throat. It choked once and dropped. In silence, the others stopped. They watched the body twitch and fall still. One let out a rasp and stepped back. The other turned and vanished behind the rocks. The human stood panting, blood on his arm, sweat dripping into his eyes. The drone above blinked green. A soft chime followed. He stared at it, chest heaving. Was that a pass? Or just a note in his final score? He didn't know. But he knew one thing now. This desert wasn't just testing his survival. It was testing how far he would go to stay human. He wrapped the wound on his arm, with cloth torn from his sleeve. The scrape burned, but it wasn't deep. He needed to keep it clean. Even out here, infection didn't care about bravery. It only cared that you bled. The sun began to lower behind the jagged rocks. The sky turned from pale blue to gold. Shadows stretched across the sand like long fingers reaching toward him. He found a narrow cave just beneath the ridge, half buried. By time and wind, he crawled inside carefully. The opening was tight, but the inside was wide enough to rest. The roof was low, made of old stone carved by ages of sandstorms. He placed the roasted meat beside him, set down his spear, and leaned against the wall. His muscles ached. His mind buzzed with too many questions. Why was he chosen? Was it luck, punishment, or something else? He didn't feel like a representative of humanity. He felt like a man who simply refused to die. Outside, the wind howled louder. Dust swirled past the entrance like smoke. The drone remained in the sky, blinking faintly above the canyon. He didn't know if it could see into the cave, but it made no sound now. It just hovered. He chewed another piece of meat in silence. It tasted worse cold. The fat had hardened. The flavor reminded him of burnt plastic, but it was food. And food kept thoughts from becoming fear. As night fell, the temperature dropped fast. He tightened his arms around his body. Heat vanished quickly in the desert. He looked down at the alien blade one of the creatures had dropped. He had taken it after the fight. Its surface was smooth, and the edge shimmered like frozen light. Held it beside his old spear. One was made from dead wood and scavenged stone. The other hummed with strange energy, alive in ways he didn't understand. He didn't trust it. But he didn't throw it away either. A sudden noise outside made him freeze. Not the wind, not the drone. Something heavier. Something walking. He reached for his spear and crept closer to the cave mouth. He pressed his body low and peeked out. A tall figure stood in the moonlight. It wasn't like the creatures he fought. This one stood upright. Armor wrapped tightly around its frame. A helmet covered its head, and its limbs pulsed with glowing green lines. It walked slowly, examining the ground. It stopped near the rocks where the fight had happened. Then it looked up at the sky, right at the drone. Its head tilted slightly. After a few seconds, it spoke in a deep voice, mechanical and calm. This human survived contact. Subject displays. Adaptive violence, signal sent to orbit. Awaiting command. The man pulled back into the cave and held his breath. His heart pounded again. This wasn't over. It wasn't even close. Whatever he had done, it had triggered more attention. The test was being watched by more than one species. He didn't know if the figure was part of Vera's people or something else. But its words were clear. He had been noticed, judged, tagged, and now something bigger was waiting for a decision. He leaned back and looked at the stars through the cracks in the cave roof. They blinked in silence, cold and endless. Somewhere above, a ship waited, or a fleet, or worse. All because he cooked something he didn't understand. He gripped the spear again. If they came for him, they'd find someone who knew how to survive. Not because he was chosen, but because he refused to die quietly. Morning came with silence and cold wind. The human stepped out of the cave slowly. His limbs were stiff. Sand clung to his clothes. His back ached from sleeping on rock. But his eyes were sharp and his hands steady. The drone still hovered far. Above, a blinking speck in the brightening sky. No sign of the armored figure from the night before. No footprints, no sound. Just red cliffs and the whisper of the desert waking up. He picked up both weapons, the old spear and the alien blade. The spear was his, part of his story. The blade was theirs, humming with foreign power. He strapped them both across his back. He would need every edge he could get. Vera's voice came again. Not from the sky, not from around him, but from inside. His mind like before. It slid through his thoughts, smooth and cold. Your next trial waits. You must cross the burning plain before sunfall. If you do not reach the pillar before night, you fail. And your kind fails with you. He didn't ask where the pillar was. He looked to the horizon and saw it immediately. A black shape standing alone in the desert. Tall, thin, sharp against the sky. It pulsed faintly, like a heart trapped in stone. He ran, not blindly, not fast, but steady. Step by step, keeping his eyes forward and his ears open. Every now and then he glanced at the drone. It followed him like a silent judge, recording his every move. The sand shifted beneath his feet. The heat rose quickly, waves shimmering above the ground. Sweat trickled down his spine. He didn't stop. The sun grew hotter. The sky burned white. Still, he moved forward. He passed old bones buried in the dust. Massive skulls cracked by time. Rusted machines broken in half. Signs of war long past. The desert remembered everything. It buried nothing completely. Halfway across the plain, the ground trembled. He froze. The sand ahead of him began to sink. A circular pit opened slowly. From its center, something began to rise. A creature made of metal and flesh, tall as 3 men, with blades for arms and glowing red eyes. It roared. Not a sound of pain or warning. A sound made to break will. The drone above did not move. This was the test. This was the moment the desert asked if he would fight or flee. He pulled the spear from his back and moved sideways. The creature lunged. Sand exploded beneath its legs. He dodged, rolled, and slashed upward. The spear struck its shoulder but didn't pierce. The weapon bounced off the metal hide. It spun fast, one blade sweeping toward his chest. He dropped low. The edge missed him by inches. He stabbed forward again, this time striking the joint near the leg. The spear stuck. The creature staggered. For a second, he didn't wait. He grabbed the alien blade and leapt toward its back. The glowing edge met flesh, not armor. It sank deep, slicing through muscle and wire. The creature howled, flailing wildly. Sparks burst from its neck. It collapsed, shaking the ground as it fell. Its body twitched, then lay still. The desert grew quiet again. The drone blinked once. Then twice. Then green. The man fell to his knees, breathing hard. His arms shook. Blood dripped from a cut on his shoulder. But he was alive. Again. Against something he didn't understand. And the desert still watched him. He stood and looked toward the black pillar. It was closer now, still far, but within reach. He wiped the sweat from his brow and walked on without looking back. Asterisk, the pillar loomed taller now, its surface black like polished stone. As the man neared it, he noticed lines running up its sides, glowing softly, pulsing with rhythm. The sand around its base had turned dark, like the heat had scorched it into glass. He slowed his steps and scanned the area. No visible enemies. No movement, just the wind pushing sand into thin spirals. But he didn't trust the stillness. Not after what the desert had already shown him. He walked a wide circle around the pillar before approaching it directly. It had no entrance, no markings beyond the glowing lines. He reached out with one hand and placed his palm on the surface. It was cool, smooth, and vibrating faintly. The moment he touched it, a voice rang through his skull. Not Vera's voice. This one was deeper, heavier. It did not ask questions. It made declarations, stage complete. Final judgment awaits. Prepare for contact with the observer. He stepped back quickly and raised his spear. The pillar's surface shifted. A section folded open like water parting. Inside was darkness so deep it felt alive. The wind stopped. The heat vanished. A chill spread out from the opening like breath from a grave. He stared into the black space. No sound, no movement. Then, slowly, something stepped out. A tall figure cloaked in layers of metallic cloth, floating inches above the ground. Its face was hidden by a mask of mirrors. Its hands glowed faintly with shifting symbols. The man didn't speak. He stood still, breathing slow, waiting for this new presence to act first. The drone floated closer and stopped beside the masked figure. A sharp tone echoed across the sand. Then the figure spoke not aloud, but inside his mind. You were not chosen. You were convenient. Your kind was not prepared. But you endured. You adapted. You consumed one of ours and survived what followed. That is what we wanted to see. He didn't answer. He knew better now than to waste words. He only nodded once, keeping the spear at his side. The figure turned and pointed toward the drone. The sky shimmered. A massive shadow appeared above them, darkening the desert floor. Ship unlike any he had seen hovered silently, wide as a city and shaped like a broken crescent. You have earned a place aboard. Your DNA, your memory, your instincts, they will be studied. You will be preserved. Your species will not be erased. But you will not return to your world. His jaw tightened. So I survive, but as a prisoner, as an artifact. A warning. A key to understanding chaos. You burned too long on a death world to be ignored. Now you are a question we must answer. He looked once more at the sky. The desert, the wind, the burning sun, they had tried to end him. But now it would be silence and steel that took him away. He stepped forward slowly, still holding the spear. The entrance to the pillar widened again. Vera's voice returned, soft this time. Almost warm. You lasted longer than expected. They will honor that. In their way, he entered the black doorway without hesitation. The cold wrapped around him like fog. Light swallowed the desert behind him. There was no sound, no wind, no fire now. Only the path forward into the unknown. Still, he did not let go of the spear. The light inside the pillar wasn't harsh. It glowed softly from the walls, pulsing like a living heartbeat. The air felt heavier here, like he had stepped underwater without getting wet. Each breath took effort. Each step felt like walking. Through sand again. He followed a narrow hallway that curved without logic. Sometimes the floor tilted. Sometimes it rippled beneath his boots. His hand never left the spear, though no danger had shown itself. He had learned by now that quiet places could still kill. The walls shifted as he walked. Symbols bloomed and vanished, strange patterns dancing like fireflies across the metal. He couldn't read them, but he sensed they were reading him. Every motion, every thought, every decision he had made since that first roasted meal. Finally, the hallway opened into a round chamber. A wide platform hovered above a black void. In the center stood a chair made of light and steel, floating inches above the floor. As he stepped in, the doorway behind him sealed without a sound. A voice filled the room, no longer inside his mind, but all around him. It was smooth, without gender, and carried no emotion. You may sit or stand. Your choice means more than comfort. It tells us who you are. He remained standing. The spear stayed in his hand. The voice did not react. Instead, a sphere rose from the floor. Inside it, tiny versions of Earth's continents glowed briefly before fading into stars. You are the last signal from a forgotten experiment. Your world was marked unworthy after the first contact failed. But something stirred. You endured without help. You evolved through violence. You built thought through fire and failure. He stared at the sphere. It shifted again, now showing. His crash, his fire, the alien he roasted. The fight on the rocks. Every moment replayed like a memory being judged. He said nothing. He had no apology to give, no argument to make. What he had done was survival. He wouldn't dress it up in anything else. The voice continued. We are many. We are the ones who measure risk before it becomes war. Your kind has entered that measurement. Some argue for your extinction. Others say you must be studied. A few believe you must be warned and left alone. He didn't blink. His jaw clenched. And you? What do you believe? The sphere dimmed. The voice paused, then answered with one word. Undecided. The platform beneath him began to rise slowly. The walls around him opened like petals. Above, the ship's great interior came into view, massive, endless, filled with machines. Lights and other chambers just like his. As he ascended, other platforms came into sight. Other beings. Some looked like shadows. Others like beasts in armor. Some floated in tanks. All watched him, all waiting. All part of this trial. This judgment. At the highest point, the platform stopped. A figure appeared, a giant, taller than any human, made of glass and fire. It spoke in a voice that shook the air. You are the human. The one who roasted a scout to live. The one who stood against fangs and metal with stone and bone. Why should we let your kind walk free? He gripped the spear tightly and raised his chin. His voice did not shake, because we never asked for war. We only asked to be left alone. But when we are hunted, we don't run. We sharpen sticks and fight until we can't stand. That is who we are. The chamber fell silent. The great being leaned closer, its face unreadable. Then the final choice will not be made by us alone. It will be made by what comes next. The human stood firm on the platform. Around him, the alien audience watched from silence. Some had faces, others wore masks. A few were shapes that defied his understanding. But all of them waited for his answer to echo across this ancient chamber. He didn't speak again. He had said what he needed. Now he held the spear upright beside him and stared into the eyes of the burning figure before him. It wasn't courage that kept him still. It was the deep understanding that begging never saved anyone. The fiery judge raised a hand. A glowing pulse rippled outward. The drone that had followed him since the desert floated forward and stopped beside his head. A small beam of light shined on his face. Then another beam pulsed into his chest. It scanned him slowly, from heart to hand. Behind the judge, a tall screen lit up. It showed his memories, not just actions. Thoughts, pain, moments of fire, hunger, regret, but also moments of defiance, protection, resourcefulness. The spear thrust through the creature's throat. The decision to fight instead of flee. The willingness to keep moving, even when broken. A voice from the side spoke. It belonged to a creature covered in feathers, its eyes soft but piercing. This one's soul is unpolished, but his spirit burns hot. Let his kind live. Let them grow with warning. Not destruction. Another voice rose from the opposite side. Cold, sharp, from a being of metal and smoke, they are a hazard. Unchecked, they devour without thinking. They adapt too fast. If we do not decide now, they will become our end. The great judge lifted both hands. The room fell silent again. Then the being pointed directly at the human. We have made many mistakes. We wiped species that begged. We spared species that deceived. But never have we seen one fight with so little and yet carry so much of their kind's fire in one soul. A hum filled the air. The platform trembled beneath his feet. Symbols raced across the walls. The ship itself seemed to be watching, measuring, waiting. Then the judge turned toward the others and declared, Earth will not be erased. Not today. The human has passed, not because he is perfect, but because he would rather break than kneel. The chamber lit with pale blue light. One by one, the watchers vanished. Some disappeared into smoke. Others folded into beams of light. The judge lowered his arms and nodded once. Then the drone returned to the human side and hovered gently above his shoulder. You will be returned, the voice said, not as a warrior, not as a slave, but as a messenger. What you tell them may guide them, or doom them. That part is no longer our concern. The human didn't smile. He didn't weep. He simply nodded. He had survived deserts, beasts, machines, and judgment. He had roasted meat on a spear without knowing it would change everything. Now he would go home with fire still in his chest. The floor beneath him began to glow. Light wrapped around his body, warm and weightless. He gripped the spear tightly and shut his eyes. A gust of wind brushed past him like a breath from another world. The chamber disappeared into brightness. When he opened his eyes again, he stood in a valley near his crash site. The ship above was gone. No sound, no drone. Just wind and sunlight, but the spear remained in his hand. It hummed now, faint and alive. He looked toward the horizon. Home was far. But his message was clear. Earth was still watched, still judged, but not erased. Not today. And it all began because he had the hunger to live and the fire to fight.